What's up, everybody? It's the beginning of the new year. I got my man Mo Murphy with me. Second day in a row, I get to do a show with Mo, which is pretty awesome. We're both in a pretty good mood. We'll talk about why here in a few minutes, but we're here to talk about the New Year's Six college football reaction. What's up, everybody? Like I said, this is a show about just kind of gut reactions, feelings. Did we learn anything from the New Year's Six bowls? That which of them mattered? Players, just let's kind of just like a imagine sitting at the bar, kind of having a chat about college football this morning with Mo Murphy from Up in Flames. Mo, how are you?
I'm great, Jeff. We'll get into it. I feel great, positive aspect of our team. So, I feel great. And it was some good games, especially yesterday.
it
Most of the bowl games were pretty good. So,
Yeah, it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. I haven't been able to watch them like I typically do in the season just because of work. And it's weird when New Year's Day is on the weekend, it kind of spreads the bowl games out to the week. And so they're just yeah, it's one of those things like wait, you'll just wake up and go, wait a minute, what there's a bowl happened? Like I kind of missed it. So
yeah.
overall, not a bad bowl season. We'll talk about some of the comments, quote unquote controversies, topics, and then we're gonna kind of go through the main games here, and then we'll take a general review. Honestly, just because I don't think we have time to break down like whatever it was, 40 bowl games or whatever. But it was pretty fun. We'll talk about a couple extras that some big teams played, but overall, we'll try to stick to the New Year's Six. So sorry everybody, we're scrambling this morning. I got a lot of stats over here and everything, but believe me, the momentum will pick up. Um, uh, First of all, I don't know how much you got to watch of it. The Peach Bowl. It's one of the big games now. It's part of the playoff series, not this year, but whatever. So it was Thursday night. It was a weird night. It didn't bother me. There was no NFL on Thursday night. The game was on. We were kind of out and about. Pickett opted out of the game, which we'll probably have the opt out discussion here in a few minutes. So Michigan State gets in a big bowl game after they had a weird like we don't know if they're good season. So
Mhm.
basically, I'm just going to ask you. I don't know whether how much you watched or replays or whatever. Did you learn anything from Michigan State Pittsburgh Thursday night? Oh, by the way, Michigan State won 31-21.
Yeah. So I watched that whole game. Like you said, no Thursday night football. I had money on that game anyway, so I definitely had to watch. But I don't want to say I learned anything. Uh, Michigan State had fight. They were the better team. You take away a team starting quarterback, you should be the better team, especially when you think about fully healthy. It could have been evenly matched. You took away Kenny Pickett. I mean, I didn't expect much from Pitt anyway. Michigan State started off slow, really didn't play great the whole game, but you also took away their biggest aspect of their offense in Kenneth Walker. He
Right.
decided not to play either. Like you said, I'm sure we'll get into opt outs in a second
Yeah,
because
we would definitely will.
but you know, I won't say I learned anything. I mean, that was pretty much the Michigan State team that we've seen all year, and they benefited from. We lost our running back, but we're playing against the team's backup quarterback, and even I'm sure we'll get into that. But you saw it with Ole Miss, in their backup quarterback situation. So it's just one of those like I don't know. I didn't know what to expect from that game. Like I felt like Pitt was more behind with missing Kenny Pickett than Kenneth Walker. At least you have your starting quarterback. At least you had your receivers. You had all your veterans. But as far as if I say what I learned from Michigan State is they were a team that flashed really well this year based on circumstance. They had they took advantage of the transfer portal. They took advantage of the extra year. They had a lot of 5 and 6 year guys. They had a lot of transfers. Mel Tucker did what he was supposed to do. Whether you love or hate the transfer portal, if you're Michigan State, you benefited from it big
Yeah.
time. Because that was half their team was transfer. Kenneth Walker was a transfer. Like some of your best players were transfers, 5 and 6 year guys because of the COVID and the extra year. So, I mean, I guess we'll have to see. I think Mel Tucker, he got that deal. He's back to the drawing board because now you got to recruit. Now you got to build that team back up or take
Yeah.
advantage of the transfer portal once again, or else you're going to be 2 or 3 steps behind, even possibly Michigan, obviously Ohio State. You're going to be right in that mix with Iowa and Wisconsin, like you pretty much are every year. So I think this was just a flash, but I don't think it's like positivity for Michigan State to actually have a chance of really winning the Big Ten consistently, just because, I mean, 5 and 6 year guys, a lot of veterans that took advantage of the transfer portal. You're not going to win the way Michigan State won in the transfer portal every year from here on out. That's not
Right.
not when you're missing so much talent. You were able to take advantage, but I just don't think this is like, Michigan State is here to come. Like they're here to stay. I don't think so. Like, and
Yeah,
Kenny Pickett. I didn't expect.
yeah, exactly. And that was a tough one. I watched this game out of the side of my eye, as we were doing some other things. And my takeaway was this is one of those games to where if you're an outsider of either team, it come off as kind of boring, kind of uneventful, as opposed to, I don't know if you got to watch the Purdue Tennessee game.
Yeah, I watched that.
Leading up to that. That got crazy. That was just fun and a great game, and the SEC and the Big Ten folks got to argue and blah blah blah. That was more fun to watch. The Michigan State Pitt game, like everybody knew how it was going to go. I was impressed with Pitt jumping out early, but when I watch Pitt, just like most ACC teams, if I'm being honest, they don't do anything that I'm like, okay, that's different. They just kind of look, they just kind of do their job and look normal. Michigan State's kind of the same way. So, my takeaway was like great season by Michigan State. Mel Tucker, that's as good a coach as you're going to get up there right now. Now that you're battling High State, Michigan, Indiana, and all these other teams with good coaches. But yeah, that was my takeaway. I was like, good for them. But here's a follow-up question I want to ask you, and we're kind of asking about all these. I'm a huge, especially after this bowl season, proponent of expanding the playoffs, getting more teams in. And I know this first round would have been home games with the playoffs and everything. Michigan is a number 10 team coming into this, and they win. So they're going to finish the season 10 or 9. Maybe they might move up a spot. There's not a lot of teams to jump. We'll talk about Utah in a minute. I don't think Michigan State's better than Utah, but they could jump them, whatever. But my question is, if Michigan State's a 10th team in the country, did they have any shot in an open playoff format if we had it this year? I mean, that's the argument that the other side gives me.
To win the national championship?
To even matter, to even be competitive. Do they? Yeah. I'll say it in a more cruel way. Would they deserve a playoff spot if there was 12 teams in the playoffs?
Yes. Yeah, I would say they deserve a playoff spot if there were 12 teams.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If it goes to 12.
You look at their wins, you look at their losses. Yeah, they got murdered by Ohio State, but that was a bad matchup for them anyway. The worst secondary versus the best passing offense in the country. Bad matchup, period. Like you put the best quarterback or one of the best quarterbacks, one of the best offenses against the best or worst secondary. Boom, take advantage of it. But
then here's what the other side. Here's what the other side says, Mo. Like we saw, Ohio State can't stop a nosebleed, and if Michigan State can't even score on them, what do they do if they have to go to Tuscaloosa and play Alabama? That's what the other side's going to ask you.
I get that, but first off, Ohio State couldn't stop a nosebleed. We'll use them for example. 24 scholarship players didn't play. Majority of them on defense.
No, I'm saying through the year though they couldn't. I'm being honest with you, bro.
Yeah, okay. So, but even still, I mean,
I'm saying when Michigan State played Ohio State, at that point, Ohio State wasn't any good on defense, and Michigan State couldn't score. So what do they do if they go to Alabama or Georgia for that? It's going to be a home playoff game, like that. That's what the other side's going to tell you. Like, what does Michigan State deserve that shot? That's all I'm asking.
I still think so, just because I mean. You tell me Cincinnati deserved it. You tell me Michigan deserved it, right? And they got absolutely pummeled. So either if you don't think 12 teams deserve it, 4 teams don't deserve it year in and year out. We've seen Clemson get blown out by Ohio State. We've seen our beloved Ohio State get blown out of playoff games. We've seen Oklahoma get blown out of playoff games. So if you don't think the 4 teams deserve it, then either why expand it or just go back to BCS? Because to me, for people not wanting to expand the playoffs, they go back to BCS because we see teams get murdered, whether you think they deserve it or not. And nobody's going to tell me Michigan didn't deserve to get in. Like,
I totally agree.
A playoff team. So therefore, if you're opposed to it, then you want to see the BCS, because if you're tired of blowouts, teams get blown out with 4. When you put the 4 best teams in the country, they get blown out. So what do you? And
I don't.
Thing is expand the playoffs, because make the bowl games matter. Then you don't have 24 scholarship players not playing for Ohio State. You don't have Utah moving a running back to corner. You don't have Kenneth Walker not playing, Kenny Pickett not playing. You don't be as upset about Ole Miss and Matt Corral getting hurt playing in that game. It's not as bad because you're competing for a championship at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Every playoff format in every other sport, the College World Series, the NCAA basketball, they have more than 4 teams.
Yeah.
I know football is a little bit different, and it is, but even still, like if you don't give these guys a shot, and I'm big on it changes recruiting. Less guys might go to Ohio State and go to Michigan State because
that's the answer.
have a shot. But that's why Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, Clemson, other than this past year, but that's why they've ran recruiting. And then Oklahoma and Oregon kind of ran recruiting because maybe if we could make a difference at Oregon, we could get in the playoffs coming out of the Pac-12. That's why they run recruiting so much, because they actually have a shot. And then you have like A&M, Ole Miss does a pretty good job at recruiting because they know if they could get over that hump, get good enough to beat Alabama, they have a shot at the playoffs. How many teams in the Big Ten have a shot at the playoffs every year? One for sure. And maybe if somebody
usually 2.
Ohio State. Right. And that's maybe somebody can beat Ohio State. So I think recruiting, that's what I'm big on.
And that's fair too. I'm playing devil's advocate because I agree with everything you say. You know that, but I don't want to have a show to where me and you are just like expand the playoffs and move on. Right. I'm asking the questions that I get, because my argument's always, okay, well, I'm with you. Here's your choice. We can expand the playoffs like a normal sport would do, or we can go back to the 60s when the president of the United States was like, Arkansas is the champion. Like, you know what I mean? Like, pick one or the other. We can't have this in between anymore. I totally agree. Michigan State, I would love to see Michigan State travel to Oregon or whatever and play the game, or the Rose Bowl is a playoff game and all that. So I agree. We're going to get to the conversation. Well, and I'll kind of ask it about every team here, but Michigan State was the one that they're the highest ranked team that didn't look good, but I'll ask that question here in a minute. So we'll go through but by the way, the Purdue Tennessee game was fire. It had the Big Ten versus the SEC, which we'll talk about here in a minute. It had that argument lit up.
And it was the epitome of non-normal Big Ten or SEC football, right?
It was perfect. It was a perfect storm.
Like, it wasn't a defensive team. It was high scoring, 2 bad defenses and 2 pretty good offenses showcasing a high scoring game. Like, you can't, in a bowl game, you can't want anything more than that. Like, if we're to me, I love offense, I love scoring. We're past the seeing the 9-6 and the 13-10s. Like, nobody wants to watch those. You want to watch those 48-45 down to the wire, touchdown after touchdown after. Like, that's what excites me. The whole I'm a defensive guy and they played great. Like, no, I want pick sixes to the house. Like, I don't want in the trenches. Like, that Cincinnati Alabama game was boring to me. Like, Bama played it very simple.
We'll talk about it. Hold up. Okay. No, it's great. I love it. I told everybody that I knew the momentum would pick up and the passion would start coming out. So the next game, we're skipping the playoff games. We're going to do them last because I think they deserve that, and then we can do a little playoff preview. So we're going to jump to the next New Year's Six Bowl, which would have been about noon yesterday or noon Saturday if you're listening to this later. Oklahoma State versus Notre Dame. This was weird. It was a Fiesta Bowl. Notre Dame jumps out. And again, I watch these games, and of course, me and you being podcasters and part of the network and everything, we keep our finger on the pulse of like Twitter, because we want to know how the fans are watching. We want to know the momentum of the game, the comments. We like to interact. So I'm sure you watch the games just like I do, with one eye on, social media and then one eye on the game. And this was one of them. We're both Ohio State fans. Here's something I got to say. I think in the first quarter of this game, let me look at the box score here. I'm pretty sure Notre Dame, I think they were up, I don't know, it was maybe 21-7 at one point. Notre Dame jumped out early, I think 14-0, looked great. All of a sudden, so if anybody doesn't know outside of Ohio State a few weeks ago hired Oklahoma State's defensive coordinator, and he left Oklahoma State. Now he's going to work for Ohio State. Dearly needed. We hope it works out, Knowles. But anyway, so as soon as Notre Dame jumps out of Oklahoma State, people start going in on Ohio State because Oklahoma State's former defensive coordinator works for them now. And I'm like, you can't tell me, like, all these people argue with me. You cannot tell me that Ohio State doesn't move the dial of college football when fans watching Oklahoma State versus Notre Dame are going in on Ohio State for a guy that hasn't even coached a game for him yet. That was ridiculous. Did you see any of that?
Yeah, I saw some of it because it was like,
this your man, right?
They have to get at Ohio State. Like, so it was, yeah. And then I was a little concerned, but he didn't coach that game, did he?
No, he hasn't been there in like 3 weeks.
Well, he didn't coach that game, so it's
And,
like,
and let's get to the other side of it. Guess who didn't score in the second half? Notre Dame, I believe,
yeah,
right? Oh, no,
got
they scored late. They scored
they
late. I'm sorry.
but they got outscored. They got outscored what 30-0
Yeah.
until they finally scored late when it didn't really matter. But they got
Yeah.
outscored 30-0. That was
So
terrible.
yeah, so like, you had Oklahoma State had 371 passing yards. Notre Dame had 509 passing yards on this defense that was one of the best. I think it was the best in the Big 12. If not, it was Iowa State, just things like that. 234 rushing yards for Oklahoma State against Notre Dame, who has a defensive coach now. Marcus Freeman's first game. Shout out to Marcus Freeman. Love him. Former Buckeye. Loved him as a player. I'm happy for him. I hope that we beat him by 100 next year. Notre Dame now Notre Dame, the vaunted toughest, blah, blah, blah. They push you around. That's their game. 42 yards rushing against a Big 12 team. So this is one of those games that nothing lined up. Nothing happened that you thought would happen. It wound up being kind of a shootout. It was a fun game. But now I'll ask you the question: did you learn anything from this game, especially being an Ohio State, Buckeye? With that, our first game next year is this Notre Dame team. Did you learn anything from Oklahoma State versus Notre Dame?
I don't know, because going into this game, it was weird, right? Because like Oklahoma State is a Big 12 team, and we're used to the Big 12 was all type of weird this year because there were multiple very good defensive teams, and defense in Big 12 don't even match up. You had Baylor, Oklahoma State. So it kind of went back to how you expect a Big 12 game to go. A lot of points scored, take advantage. But then seeing Notre Dame play and almost looked like they were going to win the game in the air. Jack Cohn played absolutely amazing. I didn't even know he had that in him. He was a former Wisconsin quarterback. We've seen him play there.
Let me hold on. I guess since you brought up Jack Cohn, can I give you the stat line? I don't think you understand. Like, I bet nobody realizes what happened. 38 for 68, 509 yards and 5 touchdowns. This dude threw 68 passes for Notre Dame.
He played terrible in the second half because he had in the first half, he had almost like a 65% completion percentage. Like he was playing, I was like, man, Jack Cohn had 3 touchdowns already. I'm like, Jack Cohn's playing amazing. And we've seen him for a few years at Wisconsin. So, and you're not used to Notre Dame, really. That's not the traditional, like you said, it's push them around, play bully ball, win in the trenches and not high scoring necessarily. Notre Dame could put up, typically they get to that 30-point range, but their opponent doesn't. And that's just how they play football. So, and then for Sanders, the Oklahoma State quarterback, for him to finally get rolling, once he started rolling, it was over. And I don't understand what Notre Dame did. Like when you watch it, you still don't understand. I don't know. Why did you go away from what's working? You got a big lead and now you want to run the ball. Like that made no sense. And then you try and get Cohn revved back up again. And it's it's too late. Oklahoma State has all the momentum right now. It's a bowl game. What are you preserving to win the game for? When they went into halftime 28-14, should have came out firing on all cylinders once again, throwing the ball. And it's at one point they went away from that. And that's when Oklahoma State, took advantage, took the momentum. Once a team has momentum, it's tough to get it back. When you have it and lose it, it's tough to get it back. And that's what happened.
These bowl games are so long too. There's so much time. We'll talk about that, especially in the Ohio State game. You have so much extra time with commercials, and the timeouts are longer. There's more reviews. There's more fake injuries and real injuries, and it just these games are it is literally I've talked to, but I've listened to coaches over the years. It is almost in these big bowl games you have an extra quarter of football. They stretch out that much, and that's why you get these fantastic games where it feels like the clock never stops. My takeaway isn't much. They had fun. I always like to see Notre Dame lose. Like when it was all said and done, I'm like, at least Notre Dame lost. It was a pretty good weekend for Ohio State fans as far as for us and our hated teams. I won't lie. It wasn't a bad weekend for us, but whatever for Oklahoma State. And here's the thing though, the next question is, and I'll answer it first, the takeaway going into next year, I don't think there was a lot. Oklahoma State is going to be a completely different team without their defense coordinator and without Sanders and all that. I don't think Sanders is coming back. A lot of this is really important about college football next year. A lot of these kids Clifford for Penn State can come back for that free year they got from the COVID year last year. So just because you see that a player is even a 5-year player doesn't mean he's necessarily leaving your team. So that's going to be really weird next year. You have a lot of 6-year players come back. I didn't take a lot away from it. It was just kind of like, I just got finished with See You Sunday. I'm kind of hungover, have a mimosa, ate some sausage gravy, and watched the game. Not a lot of takeaway. Now I missed it. I can't believe I can't remember his last name. Kyle, the safety, their best player on
Hamilton.
defense. He sat out, right?
Yeah.
He sat out, and which I call it, just so everybody knows, when everybody says a player opted out, I always just say they quit, because that's what they did. I mean, if you stop, because here's my argument. Nobody ever says I opted out of my job. We've had this conversation, like, now I opted out of my job, I'm never going back. Well, what? You quit? Like, I'm not. It doesn't have to be a negative connotation, but Hamilton's not coming back and playing anymore.
So you kind of steered into that conversation. Like,
we'll be back. We'll be back. No, every game had a big opt out in it, and then we're going to have a general conversation about it here in a minute. But I know me and Mo Murphy, and that's another hour show. It'd be a good show, but I know that we could go an hour on the opt outs and what a jackass Kirk Herbstreit is, and things like that. Just things like that, like just random stuff like that. So then we'll go. Let's see, what's the next one here? I lost it. The next one would have been the Rose Bowl next. Yeah,
let's hit on Iowa and Kentucky.
Okay, let's do this before we get to the Rose Bowl, because me and Mo will definitely have some fun with that, like, for sure. Let's just kind of discuss these other bowl games. So we had, sorry guys, I'm going through stats here. I don't have a producer yet. Feel free to Venmo me if you want to help me hire one. So yeah, so we also had, you have your classic New Year's Day is always a lot of Big Ten SEC matchups, and those are big for both sides of it. Mo's lived in SEC country. He's a fan of a Big Ten team. I don't think he's a fan of the Big Ten, but he's a fan of a Big Ten team. I'm a fan of a Big Ten team. I hate the Big Ten, but I live in Big Ten country, so I hear it. Yeah, that's just where we stand with this. You won't hear me pound the table for Purdue. I can just tell you that right now. Almost got in a fist fight about it the other day. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, I hate the SEC though. Like, I absolutely hate the SEC.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And you live there, so we'll kind of get into that. So let me get down here. Geez, I'm almost there. So before we get to the Sugar Bowl last night, which for different reasons was kind of a complete dud, especially coming off one of the greatest bowl games anybody's ever watched. Kentucky played Iowa. Kentucky beats Iowa 20-17. This is a Kentucky team that at one point in the year was, I believe they were top 15 team. I'm not sure. Yeah, and I forget who they ran into. Was it was either Georgia or Alabama that kind of put them back.
Yep.
And then Arkansas in the Outback Bowl, the famous Outback Bowl, which is always SEC, Big Ten. It's always kind of like it depends on how the season goes, but it's always kind of, first or second or third team in the Big Ten versus, so Arkansas, which had a great season. Shout out to Arkansas. That's another team that hopefully got the coach right. We're way better than people thought. A 9-4 season and a bowl win over Penn State is a big season for Arkansas. So shout out to Arkansas and our buddy Stephen Gillespie. I'm sure he enjoyed that. They beat Penn State, a Penn State team that came into the season. We might have a Penn State discussion here, because they might have had the most disappointing season of the projected good teams in college football. 7-6, lost every big game. It just never got things right. All they did in this game was score 10 points in the second quarter with a fifth-year starting quarterback. I'm sorry, Sean Clifford's coming back for his 6th year. If you're Franklin, did you ask him to? I'm just yeah. So, and then Iowa, who again started the season on a roll, it looked really good, and then they lose some bad games in the middle, and then they work their way back up to 15, and then they get beat by a Kentucky team that we talk about. They got beat 20-17 in a decent game. That's a team to where I didn't watch that game and think Iowa looked like the 15th team in the country. But these bowl games are weird. So what did you think of either one of these games as an SEC hater?
Well, so watching the Iowa Kentucky game, it was pretty much watching the same team in a different conference. Like, Iowa Kentucky, the way they played, the philosophy of how they win, it's the same. Win in the trenches, you play big boy football. And you seen Kentucky jump out early. Iowa takes the lead. Iowa messed up by not capitalizing when they kept getting the ball back. So they kept giving Kentucky a chance to come back and win the game. Like, you're up 17-14 and you keep giving Kentucky a chance. You keep giving the ball back with 6 minutes left. You gave them three different opportunities to have a drive and score a touchdown. And that's exactly what, Kentucky did. And Iowa still almost came down and almost tied it up. But still, like, when you have the momentum and you take it, you got to keep it. And so you just kept letting Kentucky hang around. You kept letting them hang around. Couldn't get that first down. On 3rd and 1, I think it was, to me, bad play calls every time. Like, they knew what you were doing. Shake it up a little bit. Like, and I get on 3rd and 1, people be afraid to pass, but, like, obviously they know the run's coming because you've been running it down their neck the whole second half. Shake it up, run pass option, little dump pass, tight end, little seam, 2 yards. Boom, dump pass, first down, keep it moving.
Like every other team in America. It's so
like, you watch Ohio State do that how many times? Swing a guy in motion, fake it to the running back, roll out, boom. You're my safety valve. If nobody's open down the field, when I look, boom, I'm gonna just dump it to you. You get a few yards. A few yards is better than no yards or negative yards. So I think those are very similar teams. I really think Arkansas and Penn State are very similar teams too. But Penn State had a couple players not play. I don't know if that makes the difference in winning that game, but, like, they couldn't stretch the ball down the field. Dotson didn't play. Like, that made a big difference for Penn State.
Okay, so
ball down the field with him not playing.
All right, let's since I hate Penn State and I think they were giantly overrated this year, and that here's something else I don't like about Penn State. The teams that beat Penn State early in the year got credit for beating Penn State earlier in the year, and by the time they get to the end of the year, like, I don't like how college football does that. Like, they'll get credit, like, whoever beat Penn State when they're ranked gets credit for a ranked team. Penn State's not a ranked team. They're a terrible team this year. They couldn't score. Like you said, their one, big player sits out. But here's my problem with Penn State. We've been told, I mean, you hear it all the time, though, like, Penn State, Ohio State game will be close or whatever. And all you hear is, like, Penn State's coming. They're the second best team. They've jumped Michigan for years. The second best team. Like, they're on the precipice. They can win a championship. Okay. So you lose one receiver. Now you don't have any receivers. Like, that's like, if you can't tell me you're a national championship caliber team and you got no depth at receiver.
Yeah.
Like, receivers are everywhere. Every team should have 10 receivers because of just the way the game is played now. You can't have one receiver, like, run the whole team. It doesn't make any sense. Look what we saw Ohio State do. Look what we saw. I mean, a lot of teams. Look what Alabama's in the national championship game. Their second best receiver, maybe their best receiver, however you look at it, isn't even playing. You know what I mean? So, like, I'm just this pass that Penn State gets for, like, they'll come into next year. It'll be the same thing. They'll be probably a top 12 team. They'll have a 6-year quarterback, blah, blah, blah. It'll be the same thing. They get all this credit. Like, oh, it's the program, the recruiting. Well, I see the recruiting classes, like, put them, they're not on the field. Like, I'm just saying, I think Penn State was one of the biggest frauds in college football this year.
So let me ask you this then about Penn State, and I'm sure you'd love to answer this question. James Franklin got the extension. Is he on the hot seat over these next 3 years? And here's why I say that. You look at Penn State, I think their problem has been, like, they've had talent here and there everywhere, but they've never had the quarterback situation. He's got a top 5 quarterback recruit coming in, which therefore means he might not be ready his freshman year, but his sophomore, junior year should be like go time. This is when you're going to get the best of me, head into the NFL. Typically these 5 stars, if they don't start as freshmen or sophomore, junior years, you get absolutely amazing seasons from them. If Franklin can't have any type of real success, and that's beating Ohio State, playing in a Big Ten championship, ultimately winning a Big Ten championship with a 5-star quarterback, the first one that he'll have under his regime at Penn State, by the time that guy leaves, do you start looking at James Franklin like maybe this was a bad contract extension if he doesn't get the job done? Like, I know it looks great in Penn State, like they have a ceiling, but now you got a guy that could get you over the hump. 5-star quarterback, one of the best quarterbacks in the country coming out. Like, he should be able to get you over the hump. A great quarterback can cover up a lot of things.
Yeah. So
is it now he should be in the hot seat? Like, over these next couple of years, you want to see what he does with this quarterback, and if he has no type of success, it's a bad contract, right? Like,
I think he should have been there the last 2 years, honestly, because of all this. Because, man, they lost 6 games, dude. In college football, you lose 6 games as a program that has top 10 recruiting. That is rough. Like, I think he should have. I think he's actually what I think about Franklin. For some reason, what I hear is like if you get in the room with James Franklin, you want to hire him. Like he interviews well. He says everything right. He's just one of those guys. He's like that guy from Minnesota, Fleck. He's just one of those guys that everybody just buys in. The results don't seem to matter as much. The scrutiny doesn't seem to matter as much. I think Franklin will be the next big coach to actually leave a team for a different position. I really thought it was going to be this year. I am shocked that he didn't. Maybe he didn't get offered the USC job. I thought he would, maybe go out there, but I don't think he's a long-term answer, because here's what I don't like about it is he's the guy that, like, after every game, and especially if it's a loss or a victory, when he talks, he acts like, I was almost there. Like, like it's a blip. You know what I mean? So he acts like each loss is its own thing. But then when you look at like, if you had an interview with him, like, okay, you lost 6 games, explain this, then it's a different conversation we're having. If he doesn't beat Auburn this year, actually, I think, that would change the whole season. You have all this. I think he probably gets fired. But Penn State's weird about this stuff. They're one of these, like, they latch onto these guys and they dig in on these coaches, and they give them a long leash, and they're kind of comfortable, and they think they're almost there. And to me, that kills a program. I'm already with Ryan Day. Like, I told my wife this last night. Here's what I said after the game. I like Ryan Day. I like everything he does. I like the way he talks, I like the way he acts. He's just my kind of person. But, and I said, I hope he's a good football coach, because I don't know if we know that yet. And I'm being honest like that, because too many of these programs, like you got LSU. We saw him do it with Les Miles. Man, he played the part. He did everything right. And you're like, but is he a good football coach? And we saw just they took a tiny step back every year. And then all of a sudden you've got a program that's like, oh shit, like what happened? You know what I mean? So, like, you can't, these big programs, though, don't let it get to that. You see what LSU just did. Like, they're like, nah, thanks for the national title, but we can't keep doing this. And I think Penn State, they're dug in, and they're going to let this drag out. And, what were they this year? I mean, we call them the 5th or 6th best team in the Big Ten, maybe. And I mean, actual best team. Like, if they played a tournament, they might be 6th. So I mean, I just don't think that's acceptable for Penn State. And I think there's a flaw with Franklin. And I believe he's somewhere else in the next couple of years. And somebody's going to step into Penn State and get a really good quarterback, or that really good quarterback's going to be playing for somebody else, because now with the transfer portal, nothing is guaranteed now. Like, absolutely nothing is guaranteed now. Yeah. So we'll talk about next was we'll go ahead and get through the late game. Let's go ahead and get through the Sugar Bowl. It was the I don't know, what do you want to call it? The most boring of the games. It came after a great Rose Bowl. It was kind of a nightcap. Baylor beats Ole Miss 21-7. Credit to Baylor, number 7 Baylor. They got the win. It's a New Year's 6 win. They had a great season. I thought they were a really good team. It was kind of a boring game. Baylor plays defense. Matt Corral gets hurt very, very early in the game, which obviously completely changes Ole Miss. I mean, you talk about possibly we're talking about one of the first 3 quarterbacks picked in the NFL draft, and then now he's out. That's a big blow for a team. You can't overcome that. So I'll ask you what you thought of the game, and then I'll ask you if Baylor, if both these teams should have had a shot at the playoffs. So first of all, just what's your take? Would you learn anything from this game?
I mean, my biggest takeaway was this is why I feel the way I feel about opt-outs. The minute I watched Matt Corral go down, I was like, this is why I'm not mad at guys, because the college football did this. Like, college football made these games not matter. So this is why I'm not mad about these guys feeling that way. Like, you expand the playoffs or go back to BCS. The Sugar Bowl would have been Big 12 versus SEC. That was essentially like, unless you were one of the 2 teams playing for a national championship, you played to play in the Sugar Bowl. Like, the SEC winner was playing in the Sugar Bowl unless they were a top 2 team. Then they playing for a national championship, different conversation. The team that probably, the second best team in the SEC ends up in that game. But that was like a fully successful season. Like, it wasn't all about playoffs or bust, national championship or bust. Like, the game, the Rose Bowl would have been the same way. Like, you as a Big Ten team, if you weren't going to be one of the top 2 teams, you in the Pac-12, y'all played. The ultimate goal was to win that Rose Bowl at the end and put the rose in your mouth. Like, that was but that game, Matt Corral getting hurt. I don't know what it was. I think it was his ankle. He had his shoe off. Some were saying it might have been, but he comes out with his shoe off. So
yeah, it sounds like it's his ankle.
I don't think he broke it. Hopefully hopefully it's the best case scenario for whatever injury he had. But that was my takeaway from that. Is like, this is why I don't get mad when players opt out, especially these day 1 and day 2 guys, these first through third round picks, the guys that are probably really going to make an impact in the league, don't have to work, like their draft stock doesn't change whether they play this game or not. Matt Corral could have played great and you wouldn't have looked at him any different.
No,
like,
there's nothing he could have done to.
And so he went out there to play for the love of the school, and salute to him, but it was also a bad decision because he could have threw for 10 touchdowns. And you would not look how you view him. All the scouts are waiting to watch him get him to the film room. They're waiting to watch him at the combine. They don't care what you did in that game.
They want him to go through. They want him to go through reads and progressions.
They're waiting for the process. They don't care about what you do against Baylor in the Sugar Bowl.
Yeah,
so that's why I'm so heavy on opt-outs, because if it's the worst case scenario for his ankle, like he might not be ready to throw in the combine so he might have hurt his draft stock. Like now he might not go in the first round. Like if he's not ready to go, he can't really show you on the field pre-draft. Do you feel comfortable taking him in the first round? Have you seen enough from him in the first, or to take him in the first round when we already say this is a weak quarterback class? So that's what I got from that game, is that prime example. Anybody who's with me and feels like opt-outs, they're for opt-outs. That's why, because we say I'm not upset, because had Wilson and Olave, had they played, Wilson goes out there and tears his ACL. Now his future is in jeopardy. His family's future is in jeopardy because he played in a meaningless Rose Bowl game. Whether we won or lost, did it really matter? No, it didn't. For the sake of us and our love for our team, yes, it did. But in the overall picture, nobody really cared.
Yeah, and to your point, I'm with you on all of that. And I want to be clear. I am not saying that Corral should have opted out. Like I'm not so far that I'm like, don't. I'm saying that if you do, like, I totally get it. I'm cool with it
either way. But at the same time, like I know Olave wanted to play in the Rose Bowl, and I know like he was practicing with them, and I know Ryan Day kind of was like, no, like from reports that like, no, you're not playing. Like,
well, especially
everybody else opted out too. Like, I'm not. You're going in the first round. You know, you did what Ryan Day understood. Like he knows you did what you needed to do at Ohio State. You gave us everything you had. You don't have to cap it off with risking injury and risking your future in the Rose Bowl. Like, and what we got for next year.
And I'm a fan. I'm a fan of the opt-outs for another reason. I was actually very happy that Olave and Wilson both opted out, because you recruit these guys. I said the opposite. I just said the opposite about Penn State. They had nobody to back up their players. Like I want the young guys that they know that, like, they choose to go to a school that has NFL players at their position in the front. So Marvin Harrison Jr. goes to Ohio State knowing that he's probably at best, he's going to be the 4th best receiver. Most teams, if he goes to most schools, he's on the field day one. Yeah. So when these guys do that, you also, I don't want to see them get punished by Marvin Harrison Jr. had 3 touchdowns in a Rose Bowl. He doesn't get that if the guys don't opt out. And so then that's when now we're bringing this whole conversation into it. That's when the transfer portal starts opening up for these guys. Like, man, I just wasted a whole season of my life. I'm going down to Ole Miss and catch 50 touchdown passes next year. Like, screw the Buckeyes. So I'm a fan of it, especially if you have these, these older players. I'm like, fine, move on, give the young guys 3 weeks to get ready and show what they can do. Ohio State's guys obviously stepped up to the challenge last night. I don't think there's mathematically, they maybe score 7 more points if Olave and Wilson play, but I don't know how much more they could have done. So that's I'm on the side of, like, give me the guys that really, really want to be there and aren't playing with one foot in the NFL draft.
And like, so with this, like Ohio State, for example, because obviously that's our easiest comparison, is these guys, the young guys, Marvin Harrison Jr., Abuka, Julian Fleming. Obviously, we know JSN is the guy for next year. We know that. He knows that.
I don't know if I know that. We'll have this conversation here in a minute.
I think he's starting next year. We know he's starting next year. Like,
yeah.
He's the guy as far as, like, he had nothing to worry about. This game was not going to impact his position at Ohio State next year. So, but you see Marvin Harris, this was a tryout, because we wait. And then in springtime, we're like, okay, we see how these guys practice. They're fighting for starting spots. They're fighting for their spot on the depth chart. But now Ryan Day has film to go back on in a game that means something, essentially, for that to kind of you got the spring practice, you got the spring game, but that's you playing against your own teammates. Like at the end of the day, there's some let up, you still got that dog mentality, but then you have some game film to go back. Like, is Marvin Harrison Jr. everything I'm seeing in spring? Is
okay.
I want right here. So it's a tryout essentially for the guys like Harrison Jr. and them for their spot on the depth chart.
That's exactly how I see it.
People said like, well, Ohio State will probably lay down. I said, they're not going to lay down. Like even before the game, they're like, I'm going to take Utah because Ohio State, if they get down early or whatever, they'll probably lay down. I'm like, they're not going to lay down because everybody that they're putting on this field needs to be out there. I'm like, so that's the difference is they're not going to lose fight unless it just gets so bad that anybody would lose fight. But I'm like, these guys need to be on the field because Ryan Day is looking at, what do I have next year? Where do I need to look for? Where do I need to entertain this transfer portal if possible? But it was a full view of what he has for next year outside of his new recruits that are coming in as freshmen. So
and that's part of and that's what we'll get that discussion here in a second because you brought up an interesting thing about the transfer portal, the positives of it. I want to talk about one game real quick, and then we're gonna go head first into the Rose Bowl. I promise. It will do that, and then we'll have the playoff talk. Another game that really stood out last week. Oklahoma and the Alamo Bowl just beat the snot out of Oregon. The score was 47-32 Oklahoma. It wasn't that close. They pulled Bob Stoops out of retirement because Lincoln Riley left. Bob Stoops was there. His son is catching touchdown passes. Oregon was terrible. They looked bad. They've just come off of 2 bad beats by Utah. They look bad again. I just wanted to give credit to this Oklahoma team that by all means, when you're kind of like Ohio State, when you're rated that high and you only think about the championship and you have a Heisman contender at quarterback to start the season, and then it's an 11-win season, but Oklahoma had a bad season. Like, their season, just like Ohio State, was a failure because it's championship or bust. You finish the season with a freshman quarterback. Things are positive. Oregon was quite the opposite. They start off high. They beat Ohio State. They're in the top five in the country. Everything's going great. And they got worse and worse and worse. And by the end of the season, Brown had no idea what was going on the field. Oregon was playing half-assed. So I know their coach left, but I just want to recognize that that's one of those games to where we talk about games are meaningless, don't matter. A team could lay down. Credit to Oklahoma for showing up and Bob Stoops for coming out of retirement and getting a big win over number 14 team in the country. So my takeaway, then I'll ask Mo Murphy. My takeaway is that Oklahoma, that was a good springboard the next year. They've got a really good taste in their mouth. I don't like their coaching hire, but they've got a new coach coming in. They've got a quarterback. So I'm saying if you're Oklahoma, at least that's a good, whatever we got now, about 5 to 6 months to get ready for next season. So, but amazingly, shout out to Bob Stoops, Ohio native. Always liked the guy. For getting that done. And Oregon's quite the opposite. I think they go in the next year with more question marks than they started with that game. So what'd you take? Did you get to watch the Oklahoma Oregon game?
Yeah.
Did you have any? All right. So what's your takeaway? And then maybe we'll talk about the coaching hire real quick.
Well, that's my takeaway is basically you see Oklahoma had every excuse to not play good in that game. Like,
exactly.
A lot of guys left. Their head coach left. The mojo at Oklahoma was like very negative. You bring Bob Stoops and it's like uplift the whole, uplift Oklahoma as a Sooners nation, as players. You see, like they played for Bob Stoops. And so it almost makes me wonder, should you have tried to convince Bob Stoops to come out of retirement and be the coach for the next few years? And did you I had tweeted this out. I said, Venables is shaking in his boots watching Oklahoma play like this. Somebody asked me why. I said, because look how that team played for Bob Stoops with every reason to play bad. I said, the pressure's on. Day one, keeping Caleb Williams. I'm like, if he's staying, and it seems like he's staying, he played in that bowl game. I feel like if he was going to leave, he wouldn't have played in that game. I said, if he's staying, the pressure's on. The offense clicked. They were up 30-3 at halftime. Let's just put that in perspective. I know, like
it was a beatdown.
32, and it seemed like, Oregon had a chance because 47-32 could go one of two ways. You can stay within a touchdown, and then you score late, and they can't answer, or you were up so big, and they slowly claw, and you just do everything you can not to lose the lead, essentially. And that's basically what happened in the second half. They gave up some big plays or whatever. It seemed like Oregon was clicking, but like none of it ever mattered. Like it was
No,
all meaningless.
it was probably the worst defeat that I think I
Yeah,
saw.
because it was all meaningless in the second half. Like it
Well,
was like,
second worst defeat. I'm sorry, we'll get to the worst defeat I saw. Second
yeah,
worst
but
defeat.
you never
No.
thought Oregon had a chance of winning that game or coming back and winning. It was just statistically and everything like that. I mean, I guess if you were betting, you're like, oh, I hope they backdoor cover if you had took, Oregon to cover or whatever. But that's what you were sitting there watching. But I mean, the
Yeah.
way they played for Bob Stoops and just that
Yeah.
iconic moment
Well,
when they
and
win and he threw up the
it's
O.
great. It's
Oh
great.
man, it was like it was almost like if you really love the sport, like your hair stand up, like you
Yeah,
got
that was
you understood the meaning of what that moment was. So
yep.
it was like, dang, if I'm Oklahoma fan, I'm like, man, I wish maybe we would have brought Bob Stoops out of
Oh, I'm
retirement.
sure they're saying that. And your point about Venables, first of all, I don't like Venables. I never like hiring coordinators. I think that it almost fails every time because now you stretch their duties out so much. Now you got to be a recruiter, a CEO. You got to worry about dragging a kid out of a strip club at 3 a.m. All these things. You can't just watch the game from one side of it. You have to have momentum. You have to have play calls. You have to coddle quarterbacks. Like if you're a head coach, you have to have a great relationship with your quarterback. So now Venables, a defensive coach, has to learn how to be a quarterback guru. I don't know if that's possible. I just think it's a bad fit. I don't blame him for taking the job. You take the money, you take the job. Eventually, he was going to have to. And then you're taking over a team like you said, Mo. They went 11-2 in their bad year. So now you have to go to the playoffs next year if you're Venables, or you got worse.
Close. You got.
It's like Ryan Day when he took over for Meyer. It really is.
You got to at least win the Big 12. And
You
like
have to.
you talk about pressure on coaches, like with these amazing recruiting classes. And I remember before we got CJ Stroud in them, they said over the next 4 years, those recruiting classes will win the national championship at Ohio State. Which therefore means like now it's Ryan Day, been to the national championship, been to the playoffs a couple times, missed the playoffs, wins the Rose Bowl. Hey, it's national championship or bust now for Ryan Day when we talk about expectations for coaches. Like Urban Meyer got us one. It's kind of like every coach except Luke Fickell, bad situation, whatever. That's an hour-long conversation about the setup that he got. I'd take him back. I think he comes back at some point. I really do. I know you feel that same way, probably for the same feeling. I think Ryan Day leaves or whatever, but you start looking at like the pressure's on for some coaches next year. Ryan Day is one of them.
Yeah.
Pressure is on. Like you make these changes on defense and whatever. And I think it sucks for year one, the pressure to be on with Venables when you lost a lot of recruits.
Exactly.
He lost a lot of recruits the
Mhm.
minute Riley left, and a lot of them went to USC or went elsewhere on their list. So that's going to be tough.
And
I can see them taking a step back.
And he'll be in
to the SEC.
when do they? Yeah, they'll be in the SEC soon, right? It's not next year, is it?
2025.
25. Yeah, but I'm still saying like that's right around the corner. When you're recruiting, you're now like his next recruiting class. He's recruiting against Nick Saban and recruiting against Kirby Smart and recruiting against whoever else is good.
Like
so
those guys' junior year.
I think it's absolutely set up for failure. So, all right, here, let's do this. We've been tiptoeing around this the entire time. Let's talk about the last non-playoff Giant Bowl game. This turned out to be it turned out to be the Holiday Bowl. They canceled the Holiday Bowl this year. You got to see it in the Rose Bowl. It was wild. Ohio State beats Utah with a late field goal, 48-45, and an absolute shootout, record-breaking Rose Bowl. Me and Mo, like if you don't know, we're huge Ohio State fans, so it was awesome. But we're both going to sit here and tell you that it was not a perfect game by any means. So the Rose Bowl is the best looking bowl game of the year, Mo. It's still the most important outside of the playoff games. Like it's just one of those things. The ratings for this game with Ohio State being in it and how close it was, they're going to be off the charts. I would imagine they'll probably pass the playoff games. I would imagine this will be the highest rated bowl game. I'd be surprised if it's not. It was crazy. I'm just giving a quick recap here because Mo's going to have some things to say. Ohio State starts off absolutely horrible, just like they did versus Michigan. They got pushed around. Utah gets 2 quick scores. With little effort. Stroud can't get a first down. We just talked about it. He's got 2 new outside receivers. that opted out, and the offensive line is shook up as usual, and we were down. They were down starters on defense. So regardless, they get down 14-0 right away. I admittedly was like, okay, it's over. Like, no big deal. Move on to 2022. We got to fix this thing. Ryan Day's on the clock. We got Knowles coming in, hopefully fix the defense, blah, blah, blah. And then like you're watching the updates and it's like, wow. Then they get to halftime and it's still 35-21. Like at this point, Utah scored 35 points on Ohio State going into halftime. But Stroud heated up, and there was at one point where he had 3 throws in a row were touchdowns. I think it was 3 throws, and it covered like over 100 yards, and there was 3 touchdowns on 3 consecutive passes. Like just an amazing game by Stroud. You can't say enough. So I'll get through some of the records, and I'll turn Mo loose here. Stroud has 573 yards, 6 touchdowns, did have 1 interception, which honestly mattered. That interception did matter. This wasn't by Ohio State didn't have the lead until late in this game. But the most, what everybody's going to take away from this game is our guy, Jackson Smith and Jigba. I'm going to say this, and I think people are going to think that they misheard me. 15 receptions. Okay. You can buy that. He's a reception getter. 3, all time. No, I want to make this very clear. Of all the bowl games that have ever been played in the history of college football, Jackson Smith and Jigba has the record for 347 receiving yards all time. Like, you want to talk about records that hold up. All time bowl game record is, you're talking 30 a year for 100 years. And nobody has more receiving yards than JSM. He did a great job. It was unbelievable. He caught the go-ahead touchdown, which was huge. He had 3 touchdowns. His longest was 52, which is one of the wildest things I've ever seen, where he kind of walked in the end zone with the kid from Utah on his back. So just a great offensive game for Ohio State. They got pushed around on defense again. We'll talk about that here in a second, but that's just kind of a rundown. Just an exciting bowl game. They came down to the wire. I feel bad for Utah. They were up for the game. They really thought they were going to win the game. I'm not going to lie. I was ready to smack them all in the face by the end, but that's just college football. I did feel that's a horrific way to lose a football game when you're up 14-0, you thought you won. This is another game to where, and I said this on Jay Stevens' show, the Locked On Buckeyes podcast. I thought Ohio State was tougher than people thought, and I stood by it, and they proved me right. I had Ohio State win a close one by 6 late. They won by 3 late, and I just knew that there was something inside of them that was a little tougher than people thought. After that terrible Michigan game. So, all right, Mo Murphy, what did you learn about the Rose Bowl? You tell me your favorite parts, favorite plays, like whatever, man.
Well, I just want to point out, Jackson Smith and the Jigba should have cracked 350 and had 4 touchdowns, but it got knocked out his hand when all he saw was the end zone. Those were another 7
fumble, yards. Yes.
So that fumble, one gives him a 4th touchdown, and he cracks 350. Just want to put that out there that he would have had about almost 360 yards and a 4th touchdown had he not got knocked out his hand. Just to put that in perspective. So, but this was a game that I didn't get up for until about 15 minutes before the game, as far as like really feeling the excitement. Really, like at first I was just like, it's a game. It's Ohio State's last game. I'm gonna watch it, but what? And then about 15 minutes before the game, the Lakers starts kicking in a little bit. I'm like, you know what? Man, this is it. Like we about to see what we're about for next year. So I started looking forward to it. Then we come out and I'm like, okay. I seen Jay post a report of 24 scholarship players aren't playing. I look at the list. I'm like, well, God, we have no chance. And I know Utah had a few players also not play, but this was Utah's national championship.
I think it's the biggest game in their school's history.
They've never played in the Rose Bowl. Being in the Pac-12, this was their school's national championship for them, and Ohio State stole it from them I guess we call it excuse, whatever, but with every excuse to lose this game. Down 14-0. It looks all bad. We're missing all our best players outside of our quarterback and JSN and even Henderson play, but we're missing our best players on every level, defense, offense, whatever, however you want to look at it. So I don't know, man. It was It was a crazy game. We're down 35-21, but we know we get the ball coming out of halftime. I'm like, we're not out of this game at this point. I'm like, our offense is doing what they're supposed to do. We come out, we score a touchdown. Now we put the pressure on Utah to answer. Like now, Utah has to score because if we get the ball back, we've shown after those first couple drives, we've shown we'll score if we want to. It's Smith and the Jigba's night. Marvin Harrison Jr. is playing well, so we come out and we score. Boom, we put the pressure on Utah. They don't answer. Score again. Utah scored, then gets to 38-31. And it's like, okay, Ohio State scores. Boom, 38-38. Utah doesn't score. Ohio State takes the lead. Utah comes back, leaves us enough time on the clock. I'm like, all we got to do is get in field goal range. At this point, our offense has done whatever they want to do. We'll get in field goal range.
They could have scored.
We had a minute left.
Yeah, Henderson could have scored a touchdown with 20 seconds left and fell down to kick the field goal.
Like,
I don't
field goal.
easily.
I don't understand it, but whatever. Like
I don't either. I didn't like that. He
clock,
easily scores a touchdown. Well, I don't know. If you've seen Ohio State's defense this year, you can understand why Ryan Day wouldn't want to give him
plus time on the clock. I get it.
And they had a kick return touchdown.
Yeah, so it was like Ohio State, they as much as we could point out the negative, I feel like you got to be positive about this because you have a guy at quarterback going into next year. And we knew that pretty much. I mean, we could pick CJ Stroud apart about the type of year he had, but he still had a really great year.
I think he had a really I'm a little higher on Stroud than I'm telling you, he played a better game against Michigan than people are giving him credit for, especially Desmond Howard. I don't.
He's gonna remember that. That's my takeaway is
he's a tough kid.
I said this. We'll get going on it. I know you'll get going on it here in a second, but then I don't want to spend too much time on it. But I'll put it like this: Michigan won the game they needed to win this year. Like,
yes,
they're fully. And I said that's the difference between a team who's used to success and a team that get the taste that you find the pot. This wasn't by any means a successful season for Ohio State. We missed the playoffs. We didn't compete for a national championship. We had a Heisman contender. We had the best offense in the country, and we didn't compete for the national championship. So this was it was way to cap off a decent season, but this was a success. And we lost to Michigan. Like that goes to we lost to Michigan. We didn't have a success. Where Michigan, they beat Ohio State. Yeah, they won the Big Ten championship, but at least we beat Ohio State. Like when they got slaughtered by Georgia, that's their Ohio State never when we lost to Clemson, lost to Bama in the national championship, never looked back on that and said, at least we beat Michigan.
I will. Yeah, we haven't done that since it's been a long time because
that's not a thought on at least we beat Michigan. We supposed to. So I think this is something to build on for at least offensively. Yes. We're going to go right back into having the best offense in the country again. We got Henderson going to be a sophomore running back. We got JSN. Marvin Harrison Jr. is a guy. We got Emeka Egbuka and Julian Fleming. Those are some guys. I've always wondered why.
You think we'll have all of them? You think?
I think so. Egbuka
everybody stays?
The only person I question is Fleming because we do have some recruits coming in. I could see Fleming he was the top out of him. JSN and Egbuka, he was the top receiver coming out of high school. Mm-hmm. He's never seen the field more than JSN, even barely any more than Egbuka. And I thought Fleming would have a breakout game, and it was Marvin Harrison Jr. that had the breakout game. I'm this is Fleming's time to put himself in a rotation, go along JSN. So if there was somebody to leave, I think it would be Fleming because Egbuka solidified. Ryan Day loves him, special teams. He's a great punt returner, kick returner. And I think you've seen him have a few catches throughout the season and more time on the field. You've heard his name more than Fleming. That he's probably that third guy. Our three is probably JSN, definitely JSN, Marvin Harrison Jr. And I think Egbuka, unless one of these guys coming in as freshmen turn out to be guys, but I just don't see that their freshman year taking over. So I think Fleming, if he's not okay with being wide receiver 4, could do a Jamison Williams, right? I
want to touch on that real quick. Something that we've heard all year as Ohio State fans is the Jamison Williams thing. How could you let this guy go? How could you let this guy go? First of all, we don't get the choice. Jamison doesn't call and ask if he can go or not. He goes. And I want to say that we just played a Rose Bowl game and had 573 yards passing. I don't think Jamison Williams is the difference in this season. So if you want to know why Jamison Williams left, it's because, these guys just had 573 receiving yards in a game. So, shout out to him. He had a great year and, he's going to keep going. But I just
So
want to put that.
fifth best receiver at Ohio State. Though, like,
And even if he plays, though, it's interchangeable. Like we've seen Harrison go in. Harrison looks like already looks exactly like Wilson. Like it's because of Brian Hartline. It's because of the system. And I even go so far as to say like, I'm not one that like I don't take any credit for Jameson Williams as a Buckeye fan, but you can't tell me that what he learned as a receiver at Ohio State didn't help him at Alabama. Like Hartline is the best receiver coach in the country. If
probably
you look
ever.
at it's crazy, but so I'm like,
Might be ever.
but my point being like, it didn't wind up mattering. That's all I'm going to say about like, I'm not saying I'd take him tomorrow. Like, I'm not saying he's not a good talent. He's a great receiver, but I'm just saying that sometimes this is why it works out. And I think Harrison Jr. really put that to bed. And I'm glad that he had the game that he had. He's definitely in the right position. That's exactly where he needs to be on the field. I loved it. Receivers look great. Just complete mismatch over Utah. They never had a chance against the receivers once they got going. My knocks on the game are though very, 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 very disappointed in the running game. I mean, never to be able to make the big hole, never to be able to establish it. They haven't established a running game since like week 5 or 6. Like they've really like it's been overlooked. But it's just not there. And it's a combination of the running backs, like their techniques and some things they do. Henderson's become hesitant for that big play, which can ruin a running back. I'm not saying he is ruined, but I'm saying it can ruin a running back. He gets tripped up by linebackers too much in the feet. And the reason that is because you're not going full speed. You're not running hard. You're not exploding through whatever hole you're not getting through that first line of defense. Really, really shaky offensive lines, a little big and clunky to push people around, but they're great pass protectors. So I understand. And then, this defense is going to be brand new next year. So I'm not going to go too long on it, but it's just an absolutely dreadful performance by the defense. The big plays they did come up with were whatever, but it just, again, no pressure. Defensive linemen were getting buried. Utah's good, but they're not that good.
Not that good against our backup.
Still get. Oh no, I'm saying that's what I'm saying. I'm not. But I'm just saying, as the game that was on the field, the defensive players still getting mismatches with. They're getting receivers on middle linebackers that run a 5 flat maybe. Like it's still the same mistakes that Ohio State's had for a year. That was the only part of it. Because here's the thing: we say that now, like we're not excusing, but like we're kind of washing away all this now. But if something goes wrong and we lose that game, that's the only conversation we're having is that we wasted 6 touchdowns by CJ Stroud. And that like there's a version of this game that is a really, really, really bad loss going into the offseason. So if I'm the Buckeyes, I'm like, okay, we got away with one. We got out of there alive. We have some really, really good feelings going into the offseason. But that game could have, like a bounce of a ball, that game goes a different way. And all we're talking about is, how they got ran over by a Utah team in the Rose Bowl and wasted 6 touchdowns. And will CJ put up with it? What's the fix? Ryan Day's on the hot seat. Like all that happens with a bad bounce is what I'm saying.
So let me ask you this. Did CJ Stroud, and like you say, he's been picked apart all year. You've loved him. I gave up on him early, fell back in love with him. It started to seem like something was missing and maybe we need to try a different quarterback.
No, you're right. It was.
We changed the quarterback, saw it wasn't the quarterback. Okay, boom, put Stroud back in there. He said he was a little hurt, comes in, obviously didn't play. Seen it wasn't the quarterback was the issue. All right, go back with Stroud. If this is the best we have and we don't have any bet, then we tend to forget that this was his first year starting. So it was like,
he's young. Yeah.
So he had to play against Oregon in a huge game, and he wasn't ready. And it's not that he played bad, but he didn't play great. Statistically, he did, but when you watch on the field, like he left first downs on the field or whatever.
Yep, that was the biggest thing he did. He
quarterbacks that run, and so when you have like just take the 5 or 6 yards, why aren't you running? So either way though, did CJ Stroud with that performance yesterday? Is he? Or is he looked at going into next season as obviously he's a Heisman contender because he was there in 4th place, rightfully so, or whatever this year. But did he impress NFL scouts yesterday? Is my question.
Yes, absolutely.
Is this Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields all over again with him and Bryce Young next year? Like, is
actually
it 2 guys and then everybody else, and maybe somebody will pop. You always have somebody pop
Ooh,
Mac Jones. Like somebody pops like a Mac Jones, or
it
then
is.
you try and convince yourself to fall in love with a guy like Zach Wilson at a small school or something like that. But is this Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields with Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, where Young has the nod right now, playing for the better team, because they're going to, he gets a extra game in the national championship, has a chance to really play well in a national championship, have that under his belt, the same way Trevor Lawrence did his first year, as opposed to Justin Fields was at Georgia his first year while Lawrence was winning the national championship, puts himself ahead. But you knew that next year when you watch both of those guys, it's those two, and then it's the rest of the class. We'll try and convince ourselves not to fall in love with Stroud too much. Bryce Young will be handed the number one pick. But is it like Stroud should be looked at going into the season and evaluated as a top 5 draft pick? Because of that, like starting with, it starts all season, but that game, like, does that put a stamp now? If I'm an NFL scout, like that might be my next quarterback. If I'm needing a quarterback after next season, like I'm looking at Stroud or Bryce Young, whoever I can't get, I want the other. Like, is he that guy because of that?
Yeah. And here's the thing. It is because now that is one thing that these performances will do, but because what Stroud did yesterday translates because he threw the ball. It was ball placement. Here's what the most impressive thing that Stroud did yesterday. And I was worried about this going into this game, is that Utah was going to show him so many, mixed fronts and false fronts and fake blitzes and all that. This is why Njigba had such a great game. Stroud saw the holes in that zone, even when they were trying to mask it and everything. Like he found these holes. Like if you go back and look at that game, like there were some great catches because, again, ball placement, but a lot of the guys were wide open because he recognized it. And that's what I saw about Stroud. Like if I'm a scout, I'm like, today's NFL, I don't care what anybody says. I know everybody thinks it's still prime time and man to man. It's not. It's cover 2s, it's cover 4s because
There's very
of
few. If like there's like 3 or 4 like man to man lockdown shadow corners.
But that's one guy. It's not across the field.
That's not like it's no.
And so what you need is a guy that can you need a guy that can recognize these holes and stuff. And that's what Stroud, I was so impressed with that and his ball placement. And I mean this, and I don't care. He reminded me of yesterday was Peyton Manning. Like take the snap. He didn't move. He didn't move off his spot, and he was his arc, and he was giving his guys a chance to catch it. And when they were catching balls, I mean, it was on like I think it was the first touchdown to Marvin Harrison Jr. Like he's so wide open, but Stroud still puts it, like he doesn't make it difficult on him. The fourth down touchdown, the first touchdown on fourth down, like my God, like you can't, like even Herb Street, the biggest doubter, hater, he hates black quarterbacks, he hates Ohio State quarterbacks, he hates running quarterback, he hates all this, couldn't help himself but scream that it was such a good throw. That's how good of it.
And it was
amazing. He did it 4 or 5 times.
It wasn't dangerous because it was, but I'm saying like you on 4th and 1, all you need is 1 yard and you go for the touchdown. Had he not placed it right, like now Utah has,
he wasn't open. Yeah, he wasn't open.
So does he not place that ball perfectly? If that's not a perfectly thrown pass by the quarterback, Utah now has the ball shooting for the end zone instead of just going to get that 1 yard and keeping the drive going. So it was dangerous. And I always, in situations like that, when I see that ball go and the receiver's out of the camera at the moment that it releases and it's going down the field, I'll be like, oh God.
Yeah.
All we needed was a yard. Why are we attacking the end zone right now?
But
it was perfect. Like it was right. It dropped right over the shoulder to where the DN is on his back on the right, and it just drops right in.
It's perfect.
And like
he played
amazing. Like I think
he's amazing. He showed mental toughness. He showed arm talent,
and he was comfortable in the pocket.
He was comfortable in the pocket.
He doesn't extend plays.
Nope.
That's what scouts are really going to look at, is because like we saw, like they didn't fall in love with like Lamar Jackson coming out. A lot of those guys, because like they make
Justin Fields,
because they make plays because they extend them. Like where guys like Lawrence, he would run if he had to, he could, but he was in the pocket making those throws, making the plays. And CJ Stroud is the same way. Like he's in the pocket and Bryce Young as well. That's why I say these two, I think people are really falling in love with them right now because they're not all about extending plays. And when guys can do that in college, they get afraid to fall in love with that because it's not that easy when you're not more talented. Typically,
it's not sustainable.
Superior. Yeah. And the talent isn't so superior where you're going against all the DNs that can run 4.3s and 4.4s. You're going against all the corners that were the best corners on their team. You're not doing this against Rutgers where, we got so much talent. Just go down the field. I'll extend it, get open. So that's why people tend to, but when you're in the pocket and you're just, boom, making throw after throw after throw, 600 yards passing, you have to think coming in the next, I don't know if that put him ahead of Bryce Young. We'll see.
Well, it put him ahead in NFL wise. Stroud had a better game than Young this weekend. Now Young's got a huge game coming up, but I'm saying NFL wise, Stroud had the best game I don't even think it's close of the week to a quarterback that I saw as far as what translates onto the field. I mean,
so I think that's what Ohio State should be excited for I think it's going to be a two-headed going into next year, the preseason, everything. It's going to be a two-headed race for Heisman in people's eyes. All eyes are going to be on Stroud and Bryce Young all year. Every game. It's going to be just like it was when Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields, their junior years, except we're getting this with Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. It would be their junior year, but because of the opt-out, they're sophomores. So, but it's going to be everybody's going to be paying attention. And it reminds me of Lawrence and Fields, the same way. It was a two-headed race for everything. Who's the best quarterback in the country? Who's going to win the Heisman? Who's going to be the top-notch, draft pick? Who are we looking to take because we need a quarterback? And all eyes on Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. And they're going to be picked apart more than anybody, just like Lawrence and Fields were. They're going to get in the film room, find me a reason not to love this guy the way I do because I'm in love with him. So I'm trying to – and they did it too much with Justin Fields, and that's why he ended up falling to Chicago because – too many people were trying to, they just didn't want to fall in love with Justin Fields, or they were afraid that their love for them would blind what really his product on the field. And you're seeing him get better each week. I still probably would like him to see a little bit more advanced, but at the same time, none of the rookie quarterbacks look great. I guess Mac Jones is the best one so far, but you're not we were wrong by taking Justin Fields because nobody looks great right now. Had the most promising rookie season. So I think after watching that game, I'm CJ Stroud put himself on the map. He could be the number one draft pick.
Yeah, the general takeaway is Ohio State fans have to as sideways as this season went and the downs and everything, they just have to be excited going into next year. That's a positive outcome. And it was fun. Of all the fans that were there, enjoyed it, it puts you in a better mood, especially coming off that, terrible, Michigan loss. It makes you feel better until day one of the season next year. So I'm not going to complain about it. There a lot of good come out of it. There's still a lot of negative about it, but that's the thing about bowl games now with players missing and things like that. You also can't go too far off the ledge because these teams will look totally different, coming
offensively. I will say Ohio State picks up right where they left off from
their offense looked great. That was the best. This is we won't have the conversation now, but this is why I think Ryan Day is going to go to the NFL because that offense was the formations, the route designs, that offense that he ran yesterday is completely sustainable, completely repeatable. If he figures out how to get a run game out of it, takes advantage of the run game, it's going to be an absolute night. They'll have the best offense in the country, and I don't even think it'll be close next year if they can just tighten up a few things in the run game. Because if they start taking advantage of the coverages, a running back should have the 10 yards of carry next year, and I think they will.
Our top tier running backs, I guess the past 2 years, even though Travion Henderson has played well, he hasn't played. We have a standard at Ohio State, and that's why we're man, we can't believe our run game because we've been spoiled with elite running back talent. And Travion Henderson is a 5-star. I just think, like you said, some of it was timid, and then I think there's a lot of pressure on running backs at Ohio State because of dating back to Archie Griffin and Eddie.
Well, the offense isn't,
and I don't think it's meant for that. I think we passed so much this year.
Exactly.
We've always had the Zeke or whatever where we get them going. And once they get going, you can't stop them. We've won games on the back of Ezekiel Elliott. I know you remember that one year we went 38-31 against Indiana. JT Bear and Cardell Jones played absolutely terrible, put the game on Zeke's back. I don't think we do that right now, but I don't think the offense calls for that either. And we don't hand the ball off enough. And we're used to a running quarterback, which also makes the difference in trying to run.
I think that was the biggest difference this year.
That run pass option, and we talked about this, talked about it with Jay on Locked On Buckeyes, talked about this with you. When you go to do that, it's either he's handing it off the run or he's throwing the ball. There is no third option of worrying about CJ Stroud. So once they see that ball is out of his hands or they see him go too much this way, he's letting it go. And Henderson's taking it. Okay, I could commit to that. The defensive end doesn't have to commit.
It's a terrible run game. They have an absolutely terrible run game. They have good athletes. Is the only reason
I think part of it is
they'll
because
fix it.
Stroud can't run though, because defensive ends on the run pass option don't have to play. They don't have to go straight and play the outside and make CJ Stroud read in open holes. They come attacking at an angle, and if Stroud keeps it, he's throwing the ball. But defensive ends can commit to keeping Henderson in that box. Where with Justin Fields, when he would fake the handoff, you had to read, because the run pass up, it's all about reading the D ends. But if the D ends come out, you give it to the running back. If they go straight, if they attack at an angle, you keep it, escape out the pocket, and throw the ball, or you run it. We don't have that threat, which therefore I think it makes it easier to stop our offense. But I mean, if CJ Stroud is going to throw for 400 or 500,
absolutely,
I really don't care. It's not for me.
But it caught up to us though, as soon as it got cold and snowed. That's all I'll say.
It did.
Day has to fix the running game. I'll be totally honest. Like, the running game was bad. The defense was bad. The passing game is just amazing. I'm glad they won, but they got a lot of coaching to do in the offseason. And it's all fixable. It's all fixable.
I don't know if we fix the run game without having because our bread and butter.
No, I don't. I think you can. I think Stroud is good enough that you can. I mean, think about it. I mean, Tom Brady does it. Modern quarterbacks that don't run the ball can have a running game out of the shotgun formation. They just need to. It's about changing the reads and the offensive linemen. Like, if you look at a lot of teams now, they're using their wide receivers basically as the quarterback, as to where you got two guys in motion. Either one of them can get the ball. Like, you do that instead of using. There's tweaks that can be made to open up, take advantage of this, and it's only going to matter 3 or 4 games a year. The other games, you're just going to give it to Henderson. He's going to be better than everybody else on the field, and he's going to get his yards. It's the playoff game. It's the Michigan game. It's if it's pouring down rain. Yeah. So, but they will. I think he did a good job of implementing the tight end more this year. Not as far as in the passing game, as far as in the blocking and the running game and stuff like that. I think the H-back will become more important. I really, really do think he tweaks it. I'm not concerned at all about the offense next year. It's not even a concern.
At the end of the day, if we can't run, if you can't stop the pass and all the weapons we have and the great quarterback we got, then it's really essentially offensively is not going to matter. Like,
it's all about the defense.
If it's raining, sloppy weather, and it would be the concern. The same, like, the NFL comparison I would have is like the Buffalo Bills. Like, when they lost that game,
that's actually my direct.
That's my that's why I found disappointment.
It happened to us. It already happened to us.
You're not built to win at home in your weather in December, and you saw that with Ohio State. Like, because it could very well be the game. The big game is at Ohio State next year, and it could snow. Like, it very well could snow. Could be cold and rainy. And if you're not built to win that game at home, then how can you even be a champion? Because especially you talk about playoffs in good weather. And Ohio State was built to play in the playoffs. They weren't built to play some of those Big Ten games late in the season in the bad weather. Had we got past Michigan, we win the Big Ten championship in Indy, whatever. And we're more built to play in Miami. We're more built to play in California. We're more built to play here or there. So I think that was a big takeaway too, is that we were built to play in a playoff game where athletes,
and it had to,
but not in the trenches.
Because
and
I grew.
We beat Georgia because we wouldn't have been able to handle Georgia in the trenches.
Nobody handled Georgia. Like, we'll get into it next, but just real quick, like, I grew up in a time where Ohio State was built opposite, and that was great. And then when we would get to the Sugar Bowl, we would get the doors blown off because of the opposite. So yeah, you have to pick and choose. I understand with Ohio State. Like, again, overall, good taste in my mouth going into next season. Let's get to the first playoff game, Cincinnati, Alabama. Everybody wanted Cincinnati to get crushed, or they wanted Cincinnati to win. Alabama comes in as the overwhelming favorite in all this. Alabama, the way I saw it was, I know a lot of people, it seems close. Alabama wins 27-6, but they scored 10 points late. It seemed like a close game. My opinion was Nick Saban did just enough to make sure he won the game, didn't open anything up, was not, just like he did Notre Dame last year, was not concerned at all. The knee jerk was like, Cincinnati was able to hang. Let me tell you what, if they wanted to have a shootout, Cincinnati loses 50-6. I believe that. I watched the game. Physically, it was fine. Like, Cincinnati's first team looked like they matched up against Alabama, but the problem is it's the rotation, it's the depth. Alabama's bringing in 5 stars, for for subs and stuff like that. That's the depth is what Alabama has. The Cincinnati's just, it's not only, they're not even in the ballpark. I did not think this was as close a game as people thought. I'm not saying Cincinnati didn't deserve to be there. Alabama could have done this to a lot of teams in the country. Fact of the matter is they whooped Cincinnati. Good for Cincinnati. Nobody cares. Like, nobody's criticizing Cincinnati. They're like, great season. You got a shot. I don't think it helped the group of 5 teams. I don't really care about the group of 5 teams. And I'm also don't hold it against Cincinnati. I just don't care about this game. I would have rather seen this be, whoever you want to put, Ohio State, Baylor, a Power 5 team in there to give them a shot. Whatever. It happened. Alabama wins a snooze fest, by 21 points. So, Mo, did you learn anything from the Cotton Bowl Classic, the first playoff game?
The one thing I learned is that people don't pay attention to football sometimes. Like, I learned that people don't know what they're talking about sometimes, and you pointed it out. Like you said, everybody's like, oh, Nick Saban. If you think Saban is the coach that cares about style points, you haven't been watching college football, because he does it. Because Nick Saban will rather answer questions, why didn't you beat him 50-6, than why did you lose 27-6? Like, he does not care about a win is a win in his eyes. And you understand the college football, and not all wins are created equal, and people only care about the losses. It's not about the wins. But Saban is, as long as I win, I live to fight another day. You can say he just tried to get through the game. The most they did to open up playbook was run reverses. That was it. Like, they weren't slinging the ball down the field. Bryce Young had 3 touchdown passes after marching the ball down the field. You know what? We'll let Bryce Young get a little bit of love. We'll let him cap off the good drive, the good, long, strong drive that we had, marching it down Cincinnati's throat. Like, we'll let him throw a touchdown. We'll give Bryce Young some stats. Because Bryce Young, they could have easily had 27 points, Bryce Young not throw a touchdown. They could have just kept running it all the way into the end zone. It was like, you know what? Let's give him a little bit of stats. Let's let him sling it a little bit, keep him a little fresh, ready for the national championship. Let's not put them out there where Bryce Young.
Let me give you the stats real quick. Bryce Young was 17 for 28, but had 3 touchdowns. Keep in mind, so Bryce Young threw less passes than Jack Cohn had incompletions in the Fiesta Bowl. So I'm just putting in perspective that everybody kind of jumped on like, oh, Young didn't do this and blah, blah, blah. Like, because they didn't have to get to your point. So Bryce Young, 181, 3 touchdowns, completely controlled the game.
And that's what Saban does. So when people were like, wow, but it wasn't about Cincinnati playing close or great. I mean, in the first half, it was 17-6, and they had outscored them by almost 300 yards. Like, it was like 300 something to barely over 100. Like, it was, they dominated the game. They didn't cap off a couple drives. Cincinnati was able to get lucky, get them off the field, a couple times. But Cincinnati never really had a shot. And they lost in the trenches. At the end of the day, that's where the game was lost. Yep. And like you said, Cincinnati just wasn't deep enough. When you put a backup in, you're putting a former 3-star, 2-star guy that didn't get any, Power 5 offers or any major Power 5 offers. Like, I'd rather play at Cincinnati than Vanderbilt. Those are the type of guys that typically you get. You had 2 first-round corners in Kobe Bryant and Sauce Gardner. But at the end of the day, like,
maybe
Saban didn't allow him to make an impact. Saban didn't allow him to make an impact.
Alabama had 301 rushing yards on the number 4 team in the country.
Yeah,
let's call them the number. If we say, here's what's funny, Mo. If we say it that, because I know where we're at on this. If we say it that way, the game sounds different. Because when you say Cincinnati, everybody automatically changes the narrative. If we call them the number 4 team in the country, this game looks totally different. If I say Alabama had 301 rushing yards, the number 4 team in the country, Bryce Young had 3 touchdown passes on number 4 team in the country, they beat the number 4 team in the country by 21 points, then all of a sudden it sounds different. But when you say Cincinnati, everybody's like, oh, that didn't sound too bad. If I replace Cincinnati with Oklahoma, we're talking about how Oklahoma didn't deserve to be in the playoffs. That's what we're saying. Yeah. If it's Ohio State, they didn't deserve to be in the playoffs. I don't care. Iowa, any other major program, if this happens to Notre Dame like it did last year, we act like Notre Dame got squashed last year. That was the same game, and Notre Dame actually had a little better chance. So if Cincinnati wants to be treated equal, let's treat them equal. They couldn't muster up anything in the playoffs. They got completely drowned and lost by 21 points.
Yeah, and it's my thing is like, who do you think would have did a better job? Like Ohio State matches up a little bit better with Alabama, right? But who really does a better job? But then at the same time, like Alabama against a better team or whoever you feel or more
Uh,
opens up the play.
I think, I mean, I don't think it's, I mean, I think Ohio State, Baylor, a healthy Ole Miss is way better. I think they can score. I think Ohio State, I'll put it, I think Ohio State can score more than 6 points.
Yeah, and they can score, and that changes how you got to run offense. You can't play conservative and keep the ball out of their hands because they're scoring
Dang,
points in the rapid.
that's exactly my point. Saban didn't have to do anything.
I still want to say, like, I still think, and we could say like they're Cincinnati's the 10th best team in the country if they all play in a tournament right now. But what I'll say is, if we're upset, then we got to tell our teams handle business because Cincinnati.
Oh no, Cincinnati deserved to be there.
Yeah, because they did. Everybody who wanted to see Notre Dame or Ohio State, yeah, I would have loved to see Ohio State. Yeah, I think Ohio State does play better. But you know what? Why knock Cincinnati for doing what they're supposed to do? Win every game and beat the team that's in front of you. I get not all wins or struggling with SMU and Navy or whatever you don't get no credit for. But at the end of the day, they did what they were supposed to do. Ohio State didn't. Ohio State didn't win their championship, and they didn't beat Michigan. Like they beat Michigan, won Big Ten championship. Obviously, Cincinnati's not in there. But
here's okay.
So you do what you're supposed to do, and everybody else didn't.
I said this all year, though. I said this all year, and yeah, because I was on Locked On Buckeyes every week after the playoff rankings or whatever. And here was always my problem. You can go back and listen to it. Please do go back and listen to me and Jay talk about this every week. This is what I said. First of all, like Jay's right. You don't. They need to give us the criteria before the season starts. They needed to say all Cincinnati has to do is win out and they're in the playoffs. Then we don't have to worry about it. We don't have to argue about it all year. But here's what bothered me. Cincinnati got into the playoffs because they were considered to have the best victory because they beat Notre Dame at Notre Dame. So all season they rode. So my problem was always like, well, I didn't know that all we had to do was beat Notre Dame and then play nobody, and that got you in the playoffs because that's not what Ohio State had to do. That was my point as a fan. But then it wound up being true because this is what gets me. Now that we look back, so Cincinnati got into the playoffs because they beat a Notre Dame team that lost to Oklahoma State. So now, like, are we like, if you only get tested once and then that team's just average, we don't get to find that out until it's all said and done. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and it does become that there does need to be a criteria, at least a set criteria. Like, and we know when style points exist in college football, and we know like they don't. Oh, Ohio State won by 14. They should have won by 28. Like, so we don't give them as much credit. And I get that you weigh certain teams based on past past last year matters for Ohio State. Like, so going into this year, like this season will matter next year when evaluating Ohio State. Like, like Bama, Ohio State, Clemson, Oklahoma. Last season is gonna weigh how they beat certain teams last year, where those teams improved. Do you take it? Like, they're gonna look at last year's film and this year's film and determine where they should be ranked. Cincinnati, it's a fresh start. Next year, like if Cincinnati goes undefeated again, they probably get in again if teams don't handle business, depending on. I mean, I think they'll evaluate a little bit because the way they might give them the benefit of doubt. Like you said, if this is Oklahoma or Ohio State or Baylor or Oklahoma State or whoever, Alabama murdered them. Where Cincinnati hung. They're not as bad. I mean, they lost by 21, but they were in the game most of the game. So, like, they deserve to be in there. We could justify putting them in there again, but hesitate putting Ohio State in there again if it was under the same circumstance.
So, Mo, we actually got to find that out. I know you got to go here in a minute, but we actually got to find that out because what happens in the next game? Georgia manhandles Michigan in the second playoff game, and Michigan gets roasted. Like they're getting skewered for it. Georgia wins 34-11. It was not that close. Michigan had a late touchdown that they really celebrated. Really proud of that late touchdown. Michigan was really proud of that. But this game wasn't close. Michigan scores 0 in the first, 3 in the second, 0 in the third. Georgia made every play. That defense wasn't giving up a thing. But this was my exact point. Michigan loses. All of a sudden, they're terrible. They didn't deserve blah, 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 blah. The same, you know what I mean? Like they lost by 23 points. Cincinnati loses by 21 points, but it's a completely different view of it. Georgia looked way better than they did against Alabama in that SEC championship game. I'm not going to lie. I had no problem seeing Michigan getting humiliated in the playoff game. Again, they deserve to be there. They deserve to beat the Buckeyes. And I also don't mind seeing them getting humiliated. Like I tell everybody that up front. That's just part of like growing up in Ohio and being a Ohio State fan. So Mo, what did you learn before we get out of here from the Capital One Orange Bowl? Georgia 34, Michigan 11.
I'm glad they paid the price for all that yada yada that they talking for a month. The embarrassing thing that they did, because they're gonna pay. And I mean this because I know how Ohio State it. They gonna pay for that month. So I hope that month was very fun. Because I kept saying, I said Michigan's gonna pay for it. I said they're gonna pay for it in the playoffs first. I
Yeah.
I had a little bit of confidence that Michigan can hang with Georgia, but they don't win the game. Like, I never thought they were going to win. But I'm like, they can hang. They can make it interesting. They could backdoor cover something. Like, Georgia kind of lets off. But I said, here's what, if Michigan does this, and they did it. I said, Michigan does this, they have no chance. I said, Georgia's going to stop the run early. If Michigan does not stick with the run, because it's been their bread and butter all year, they can't throw the ball. Like, they threw it over Michigan State, and that was their best game, Cade McNamara's best game, because that was the worst secondary. They can't throw the ball. And so if they stick to trying to throw the ball to win the game, they get murdered. And you saw that. They could never get the run going. They went away from the run, tried to put it in Cade McNamara's hands. He's not that guy. You know, I think J.J. McCarthy is definitely the guy going forward.
Yes.
McNamara is not that guy. And in an interesting thing, I read an article. I think Harbaugh's gone. Like, I think Harbaugh leaves Michigan. And what I was reading is, I know the Bears' job is supposed to
I was going to say, I heard Chicago. I've heard the rumors.
I heard Harbaugh. That was like his dream job. You know, he played quarterback there, but they said like he won't leave Michigan for any job, but he'll leave for the right job. And I think, you know, people tend to think, people close to the Michigan fan base, and think that Harbaugh thinks like, this is it. I did everything I could do here. Like,
well, he doesn't. Yeah,
but we can't. This is about our max. It is we won't get to a national championship. We won't beat Ohio State consistently. Like, we stole one. We won the game I needed to win to you know, for his legacy at Michigan. He won the game he needed to win. He got him a Big Ten championship. He gets to the playoffs and realizes like, Ohio State gets in here and they can hang typically year in and year out because their talent matches with those SEC teams. Their style of play matches with those SEC teams. And that's the difference. I'll give the SEC that. That's the difference between the SEC and Big Ten. That's why Ohio State is the one Big Ten team that can hang with all those other SEC teams, because they play like them. They play fast. They have the athletes everywhere. Every other Big Ten team plays in the trenches. And so for you to get dominated in the trenches by an SEC team, basically Georgia beat them at their own game. Like, Michigan dominated Ohio State in the trenches. That's what Big Ten teams do. They play slow. They have the offensive linemen. They go to the draft. They got some pretty good defensive linemen. They play slow, big boy football. Ohio State doesn't. That's why they can hang, because they can athlete to athlete with anybody in the country.
Yes.
So now that he got beat at his own game, yeah, maybe he could beat Ohio State next year. But like, is that even good enough? Is beating Ohio State, now that I've been to the playoffs, that's the expectation. Can I maintain that expectation? No. Hey, that job in Chicago, I've always wanted to coach there. Like,
I will say this: Michigan doesn't have as good a roster coming back next year. First of all, Hutchinson got completely, I won't say exposed, but not a great game for him. Another, we talk about the opt-outs. This is why you opt out sometimes. Like, not that he should have, but I'm just being honest. Like, he got bullied. But the only thing I'll say about Michigan, their schedule next year is abysmal. Like until the Ohio State game, they might, I guess Michigan State, if we assume they're going to be good again, but they could easily be undefeated going into Ohio State next year when they lose that game. So, but basically that's what I took away, is this was the Michigan game that I thought they were, again, deserved to be there. But Georgia, this was the Georgia team that I was told existed. I still think they threw the SEC championship game, or I think they played it close to the vest, or whatever you want to call it. I'll absolutely, to my dying day, say that Georgia didn't give it their all to beat Alabama, because they knew they were going to make the playoffs regardless. Nobody will ever change my mind. Especially, we'll find out next week. We're going to find out next week. If Georgia's a different team next week, then I'll be proven right. So, Mo, real quick before we get out of here, who wins the national championship game?
Alabama. I'm gonna go Alabama. I'm not gonna bet against Nick Saban. I know Georgia. I think Georgia plays a lot different game. I know people want to lean Georgia. I know they're the favorites going in, but I mean, if you're basing it off the performance of the playoffs, that is the Georgia team that we thought was head and shoulders above everybody. But we also seen Bama didn't have to open up the playbook.
Mm-hmm.
They played conservative, just get the job done, because we know we're gonna play Georgia. So I think I'm gonna take Alabama in a close one, and I think it's low scoring for a college football game, but I think it's like it could be a 28-24 type of game, and I think Alabama gets it. I think Bryce Young, And if I'm a trust a coach that if he's lacking anywhere and he can prep, is Nick Saban. So I'm not going to bet against Nick Saban. I'm not going to pick against Nick Saban. Coaching against his former, him and Bill Belichick. Those are got when they're coaching against their former assistants. They get the job done for the most part. He's been here. He does this. He has no hump. If Alabama loses, does no damage to Alabama.
No,
right?
no, it's a square game.
Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, he loses this game. People look a little like, hey, hold on, we still can't get over the hump. You lost to Bama twice. You lost to Bama. This will be the second time you lost to Alabama in the national championship after you looked like you could get over the hump a couple years ago, winning in the SEC championship. So I think it could be a Kirby Smart on the hot seat. As good as Georgia has been these past few years, there's still been some holes and some not so much love. So I'm gonna go with Alabama and Kirby Smart. I think the Kirby Smart conversation changes and the narrative changes a little bit out of Georgia.
I'm leaning Georgia. One is Mechie being out. I take a couple points away from Alabama. It's not their fault. I think they're both teams are really good, but like I say, I had the privilege of watching this game with a longtime defensive football coach, legendary football coach, local here. And the way we watched the Georgia defense and the things he saw and the things he pointed out, I think are sustainable. I don't think Alabama can run for 300 yards on Georgia. And I think that Bryce Young, though great, it is still could make a mistake, and I think that's all it's going to take is one mistake. This Georgia defense just looks different, and I get the feeling like I used to have with these Alabama teams. Like they may show up and Alabama scores 13 points. Like it may just one of these freak performances. I don't think that's it. I think Georgia barely wins, and I think it's a fun game. And the good news is I don't have to watch Cincinnati or Michigan in this freaking game, so I can just enjoy it and have fun and worry about the Ohio State versus Notre Dame game to start 2022. So Mo Murphy from Up in Flames, Off the Ball Network. I know you got a show on Dash Radio every week. I'm going to try and get you back on for some more college football coverage, NFL coverage we've been doing with the network. It's been a blast, man. I want to thank you for doing this this morning. It was a fun college football season. We got one game left, and I'm excited about it. And, hopefully next year we're having this show and we're talking about, the Buckeyes going to the national championship game.
Yeah.
So, thanks, Mo Murphy. Happy New Year, everyone. Have a great day, and check out offtheballnetwork.com for all your